Captain Dax Renner never received the grand promotion ceremony he secretly expected. No admiral waiting with a handshake, no reporters, not even a congratulatory banner. Just a blinking notice on his wrist device. Promotion approved. Report to Hangar 94 Gamma at 0700. Clearance level red. That was it. He slurped down the last of his synthetic orange energy gel, missed the recycling chute, and straightened his collar for the 7th time as he walked toward his new post. When he saw the ship, his breath caught. The vessel wasn't massive, but it radiated menace. Its sleek frame shimmered faintly with protective fields, twin cannons folded back like a predator waiting to strike. The name glowing across its prow, Vidian Lance, was written in glyphs not entirely human. That was concerning. The docking tube extended, inviting and intimidating at once. Dax mentally replayed all the questionable choices that had led him here. Maybe it was losing that poker game with Vice Admiral Chun. Maybe refusing that cushy desk job on the lunar base. Maybe those old blog posts criticizing traditional command structures. Too late to regret now. He took a deep breath that smelled faintly like recycled citrus and nerves, then stepped aboard. The silence hit first. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy stillness of a courtroom where you already know the verdict. Then came the footsteps, 6 of them measured and synchronized. He turned and nearly stumbled. The crew waiting for him were all women. Not human women, taller, with a kind of elegant severity, long upward curving ears that bore faint notches like rank markers. Their uniforms resembled his but looked far better tailored. They stood in perfect formation, eyes assessing, not a hint of a smile. One stepped forward, copper-toned skin marked with delicate silver tattoos, eyes glowing like molten stone. "Lieutenant Sierra, Communications Officer," she said evenly. "We are aware of who you are, Captain." Relieved he hadn't wandered onto the set of a bizarre opera, Dax forced a nervous grin. "Good. I was beginning to wonder, though I wasn't exactly told I'd be commanding a ship of—" He gestured vaguely. "Long-eared alien warrior women." Sierra tilted her head. "Is gender an operational factor in human command logic? Not unless someone tries dating the reactor core." Dax shot back, then paused. "And for the record, that's only happened once." A flicker of amusement or indigestion touched her expression. Encouraged, he shifted to a more formal tone. "All right, why don't you show me around before I start hallucinating star charts from caffeine withdrawal?" She gestured down the corridor. "Follow me, Captain, and beware the coffee machine. It has not passed tolerance scans for human digestion." "Danger's my middle name," Dax quipped. "We were informed it was Leonard," Sierra replied without blinking. "Dax Grund. Damn personnel files." As they walked, the ship unfolded around him. Walls seemed to breathe, doors opened with sighs, and shimmering panels pulsed faintly, as if alive. Dax pointed at one, glowing with soft blue light. "Is that the AI? "Yes." "Is it spying on me?" "Yes." "Well, glad we've established mutual trust." For the first time, Sierra's lips twitched with something that might almost be a smile. By the end of the first day, Captain Dax had already concluded that the Vidian Lance was less of a warship and more of a moody roommate. The walls thrummed softly when he spoke too loudly. Corridors redirected him if he tried wandering without guidance. And the so-called coffee dispenser spat out a dark sludge that smelled like burned algae. "This isn't coffee," he muttered after the first sip. "This is a hate crime in liquid form." "It is nutrient-balanced," Sierra replied flatly from the corner of the mess hall. "For who?" "A sea urchin." Dax gagged, pushing it away. "You're telling me this is how interstellar empires keep morale up? No wonder you're always so serious." The crew, for their part, maintained a disciplined distance. They moved with flawless precision, carrying out silent duties as though the ship itself directed them. Every time Dax tried humor, he was met with polite stares that could freeze lava. It was like commanding a team of statues, very tall, very judgmental statues, that changed during their first briefing in the strategy chamber. A holographic map of a derelict vessel floated between them, jagged and broken against the starlit background. Unidentified craft, reported the navigation officer, Kaylin. Her hair shimmered like mercury in the overhead lights.
No transponder.
Energy signatures suggest scavenger tech. Possible trap. Translation, Dax said, crossing his arms. It's either a ghost ship or a floating junkyard. Fantastic. So what's the plan? Send a probe, or draw straws and shove the loser into a spacesuit? None of them answered immediately. Finally, Sierra spoke. Our directive requires investigation. Salvage protocols dictate boarding. Dax raised a brow. Let me guess. This is where you expect me to give a rousing speech about courage and glory? That would be traditional, Kaylin admitted. Well, Dax said, leaning forward. Tradition and I aren't on speaking terms. I'd rather not risk my shiny new crew of space Amazons by walking straight into an obvious ambush. So we're going to be smart. He tapped the hologram, zooming in. We send drones first. If they get chewed up, we know not to follow. The crew exchanged glances, their expressions shifting almost imperceptibly. Sierra inclined her head.
Prudent.
Not customary, but prudent. Dax smirked. Welcome to human leadership, equal parts paranoia and caffeine dependency. Hours later, the drones drifted into the derelict. Their cameras projected twisted corridors and fractured bulkheads, eerily lit by the glow of broken reactors. First, nothing stirred. Then shadows moved too fast, too fluid. The feed cut out. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Well, Dax muttered. Either the place is haunted or someone just ate my very expensive robots. Kaylin's voice was steady, but her eyes glimmered with unease. Captain, the law of salvage demands boarding. Dax rubbed his temples. Of course it does. Tell me, does the law of salvage also demand stupidity? Frequently, Sierra replied without irony.
Dax sighed.
Fine. Prep the boarding team, but let's do this my way. That means scanners hot, safety's off, and if something jumps out, don't wait for me to give the order to shoot. Consider it already given. The crew stiffened, surprised. Then, one by one, they nodded. For the first time, their perfect formation didn't feel like cold obedience, it felt like respect. The boarding craft latched onto the derelict with a hollow clang that reverberated through Dax's chest. He hated that sound, it always meant something bad was about to happen. He adjusted his helmet, muttering, If anyone starts whispering get out in the dark, I'm leaving you all behind. Sierra, standing at his side with her plasma rifle slung across her shoulder, replied coolly, Acknowledged. That was sarcasm, Dax shot back. Noted, she said without blinking. The hatch hissed open, and the team advanced into the dark corridor. Their boots clanged softly against metal grates warped by time and battle. The derelict smelled faintly of ozone and rot, even through the filters. Dax swept his light across the walls, revealing deep gouges that didn't look like simple structural damage. Something had torn through here. Kaylin's voice came through the comm scanners detect biosignatures. Multiples. Not stable. Not stable.
Dax frowned.
That's not exactly a phrase that makes me feel cozy, Kaylin. Sierra's rifle flicked upward as shadows moved ahead. The lights flickered, then stabilized, revealing twisted figures clinging to the ceiling. They were half organic, half metal, their eyes glowing faintly. Parasites fused with machinery, feeding off the derelict's husk. Contact, Dax whispered. The creatures screeched and dropped down. Plasma bolts lit the corridor, echoing like thunder. The crew moved with perfect synchronization, every shot precise. Dax ducked behind a panel, firing bursts from his sidearm. One of the parasites lunged straight at him, jaws wide, sparks flying from its fused metal limbs. Time slowed. Training kicked in. Dax braced and fired point blank, the blast tearing it apart in a shower of sparks and ichor. He rolled back to his feet, coughing. Okay, note to self. Never complain about boring patrol duty again. The fight dragged on. The parasites swarmed, their screeches echoing through the broken halls. But something shifted. Dax realized the crew wasn't just watching him. They were adjusting to him. They moved in tandem with his orders, following his improvisations instead of their rigid doctrine. When he called for a fallback, they didn't hesitate. When he shouted to flank, they executed flawlessly. Finally, silence fell. The last parasite smoldered on the floor, its glowing eyes fading. The crew reformed, weapons ready, but their breaths were steady. Sierra approached him, wiping dark ichor from her armor. Efficient. Your methods are unorthodox, but effective. Dax raised a brow. Translation. I didn't get us all killed. You're welcome. Kalen added. Our previous commanders would have demanded we hold position, no matter the losses. You adjusted. You valued survival. Dax holstered his weapon. Yeah, funny thing about survival, I'm a big fan of it. Makes breakfast taste better. There was silence, then, shockingly, a laugh. A short, genuine sound from Sierra. The others didn't laugh, but the stiffness in their posture loosened. As they trekked back to the boarding craft, Dax caught the subtle difference. They no longer looked at him as an outsider fumbling with command. For the Vidian lance hummed softly as the boarding craft redocked, sealing them back into the safety of the warship. Dax unlatched his helmet, sucking in a deep breath that smelled faintly of recycled pine. His nerves still buzzed from the fight, but he was alive, and more importantly, so was every member of his crew. As the airlock cycled shut, Kalen reported, all hostiles neutralized. No casualties. Her voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Pride. Dax grinned despite the ichor splattered across his armor. Music to my ears. Though I'll admit, I was about 2 seconds from inventing the galaxy's first pants-based propulsion system back there. Sierra blinked at him. Pants-based propulsion. Running away, Dax explained. Very, very fast. A ripple of amusement passed through the crew. They didn't laugh out loud. Discipline ran too deep, but their eyes told the story. They were warming to him. Back in the command chamber, the debriefing was short. The derelict had been infested, but the threat was contained. Salvage drones would sweep the wreckage for tech, while the Vidian lance prepared to jump back to patrol routes. Simple, clean, efficient. Yet for Dax, the real victory wasn't the kill count. It was the shift in how the crew looked at him. When the meeting ended, Sierra lingered. Captain, she said, your decisions today prevented unnecessary loss. You led us with humanity.
Dax chuckled.
That's one way of saying I made it up as I went along.
Adaptability, Sierra corrected.
A trait we were not expecting. It is welcome. Dax tilted his head. So you don't think I'm a complete disaster anymore? Her lips twitched. The closest thing to a smile he'd seen from her yet. Not complete. That night, Dax wandered the observation deck alone. The stars stretched out in endless cascades, sharp and cold against the dark. He leaned against the railing, thinking. When he first stepped aboard, he'd felt like a misplaced joker in a deadly serious deck of cards. But now maybe he fit, just not in the way anyone expected. The crew didn't need a flawless commander. They didn't need another rigid leader who followed doctrine to the letter. They needed someone willing to improvise, to care, to crack jokes in the face of horror and make survival matter more than protocol. And maybe, just maybe, that someone was him. He whispered to the stars, guess I'm not just borrowing this ship anymore, huh? The ship's AI pulsed faintly along the walls, its voice low and almost amused. Acknowledged, Captain.
Dax frotze.
Wait, you can hear my private pep talks? Always, he groaned, rubbing his temples. Great. Even the ship thinks I'm insane. Still, he couldn't stop the smile spreading across his face. For the first time, Captain Dax Renner felt like he belonged. Not because of the ship or the title, but because an unlikely crew of alien warriors had chosen to follow him. And in the vast loneliness of space, that was more powerful than any fleet. The first time they looked at him as their captain.